Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at something pretty amazing. The possibility that what we thought we knew about the evolution of symbolic thought could be totally wrong.
It really is like a total paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, we thought for so long that symbolic thought, that very human thing, the ability to think in symbols, to represent ideas,
Right.
started in Europe like 40,000 years ago.
Oh, so you mean like cave paintings and the Venus figurines, the things you see in museums?
Exactly. But here's the thing. New discoveries are changing that timeline and challenging that Eurocentric view.
So what kind of discoveries are we talking about here? What makes them so groundbreaking?
Well, there's evidence from South Africa, a shell that dates back 100,000 years, and get this, it has traces of red ochre in it.
A shell? You mean like something you'd find at the beach? What's so special about that?
This shell is linked to Neanderthals.
Yeah.
And the ochre, well, it was probably used for painting or decoration.
Hmm.
And that really challenges this long-held idea that Neanderthals couldn't think symbolically.
Yeah. You're saying a painted shell is turning our understanding of human history upside down? That makes you wonder what else we've got wrong.
It really does raise those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you realize just how much we still have to learn about our own past.
So Neanderthals might have been more sophisticated than we thought. Where do other human species fit into all of this? I've heard about these new discoveries like Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbit.
Right, Homo floresiensis lived on an Indonesian island called Flores until surprisingly recently, maybe even as recently as 12,000 years ago. And their discovery, along with others, well, it makes the whole picture of human evolution even more complicated.
So we've got Neanderthals potentially tinking, hobbits living on islands. It's a lot more complex than that straight line from ape to human we were taught in school.
Absolutely. And the genetic evidence proves it. We now know that Homo sapiens actually interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans. That's another human group, multiple times and in different places. This interbreeding happened for a long time, which means there were complex interactions between these groups, not just one replacing another.
This raises a question for me. How did these different human groups interact? Was it always this brutal competition with Homo sapiens coming out on top?
That's the story that's been told, but it's worth looking at again. Were Homo sapiens really more aggressive or technologically advanced? Or could their success be partly because of this interbreeding? Maybe they got beneficial genes from other human groups.
So instead of survival of the fittest, maybe it was more like survival of the best connected, or even survival of those who could adapt and learn from others.
That's a much more nuanced and probably more accurate picture.
Yeah.
It challenges this whole idea of Homo sapiens being inherently superior.
I'm starting to see how this all connects. If we question this narrative of Homo sapiens' superiority, then we have to reconsider what other human species like Neanderthals were capable of.
Exactly. And there's a fascinating genetic mystery that might shed light on how they interacted. It's the curious absence of Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA in modern humans.
Hold on, missing DNA. That sounds like a mystery waiting to be solved.
It is. Mitochondrial DNA is passed down from mothers. We found Neanderthal DNA in the nuclear genomes of modern humans, which means there was interbreeding, but no Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA. It's strange.
So this missing DNA is a big question mark. It suggests that Neanderthal society might have been structured very differently than we thought, and their interactions with Homo sapiens were more complex than just simple competition.
Precisely. It raises all sorts of questions. Were different Neanderthal clans super isolated? Or maybe, and this is just a thought, were male Neanderthal and female Homo sapiens pairings more fertile than the other way around?
It's amazing to think that something as seemingly simple as the lack of this particular DNA could tell us so much about the social lives and relationships of these ancient groups.
Absolutely. And what we learn challenges our understanding of what it means to be human. It makes us rethink the assumed hierarchy of human evolution.
Okay, we've talked about painted shells, missing DNA, and the complex interactions between these different human species. Now I'm curious about the evidence for symbolic thought in Neanderthals. What about their burial practices? Didn't they bury their dead?
They did. Neanderthals buried their dead. But the big question is, were these burials just practical, or did they have deeper meaning? Did they reflect rituals or even religious beliefs?
That's a huge question. Were they just getting rid of bodies for hygiene or to avoid predators? Or were they expressing something deeper, something about their understanding of life and death?
That's what we're trying to figure out. And there are clues. For example, in the Iberian Peninsula, there's a 40,000-year-old Neanderthal child burial site, and the child was buried with animal horns.
Animal horns. That does sound symbolic.
It could be. Why else would you bury someone with those specific objects? But even today, archaeologists debate what ancient sites mean.
Like Stonehenge, we still don't know for sure what that was all about.
Exactly. And there's another example at Teshiktash in Uzbekistan, where a Neanderthal child was also buried with animal horns. The way the horns were arranged could be deliberate, which suggests a ritual, or it could be purely coincidental.
So even with these clues like the horns, we can't definitively say if Neanderthal burials were purely practical or if they reflected more complex beliefs.
Right. It shows how hard it is to interpret the past and how we need to avoid looking at these ancient cultures through our modern lens.
It's like we're trying to see through a foggy window into the past, putting together a puzzle with missing pieces.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And sometimes that fog clears just enough to reveal something amazing like Göbekli Tepe.
Okay, Göbekli Tepe, that's the site in modern-day Turkey with the massive stone pillars and intricate carvings, right? What's the connection?
Göbekli Tepe is about 12,000 years old, and it's one of the oldest known monumental structures built by humans. The debate is about its purpose. Was it a temple? A place for rituals? If so, what does that tell us about the beliefs and social organization of the people who built it?
So we have these potential Neanderthal burial rituals 40,000 years ago, and then this amazing construction at Göbekli Tepe much later. It seems like a huge jump.
It does. And it reminds us that human evolution wasn't a straight line.
Yeah.
Not all humans were on the same path, moving at the same speed. Different human groups probably had different levels of technology and culture, and these levels likely changed over time.
So it's not like everyone was progressing at the same rate. It's more like a mosaic with different groups developing in their own ways.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just like today we have isolated hunter-gatherer societies living at the same time as nations that can explore space. In the past, there was probably a lot of diversity in how different human groups lived and thought.
That's an important point. We can't look at the past through our modern ideas of progress and development. The amazing diversity of human cultures, both past and present, makes our history so much more interesting and challenging to understand.
Absolutely. And it shows that we need to be humble when we study human evolution. We're really just starting to understand how complex our past is and what other human species were capable of. It really shows how much we're still learning.
Okay, so we've got Neanderthals potentially painting, doing what might have been complex burial rituals, and then this leap forward with Göbekli Tepe. Where does that leave us? Where does that leave Homo sapiens? Were WE really the special ones?
That's the question, isn't it? The more we learn about these other human species, the more we realize that this whole story of Homo sapiens being inherently superior might be a little exaggerated.
Exaggerated. We're the ones hosting this podcast, building rockets, writing symphonies. We must have had some advantage, right?
Of course, Homo sapiens have done some remarkable things. But we have to be careful not to think that our accomplishments today make us better as a species. It's like saying a fish is better than a bird because it swims better.
Yeah.
Each species has its own strengths, its own adaptations.
Okay, I see your point. We can't judge these ancient groups by our modern standards.
Exactly. And this brings us back to symbolic thought. For a long time, that was seen as what separated us, Homo sapiens, from other humans. But as we've seen, the evidence suggests that Neanderthals and maybe other groups could think symbolically too.
So symbolic thought might not be unique to Homo sapiens.
That's right. And that leads to another question. What made symbolic thought evolve in the first place? Was it gradual, or was it triggered by something in the environment or in society?
That's a good question. What are some of the ideas out there?
Well, one theory is that language was important. As humans started communicating more complex ideas, they needed a way to represent them symbolically. Symbols became a way to quickly convey meaning.
That makes sense. You need symbols to stand for things you're talking about, right? Like using the word tree instead of pointing to a tree every time.
Exactly. Another theory focuses on social interaction. As human groups got bigger and more complex, they needed new ways to work together and stay united. Symbolic thought, like rituals, art, and shared beliefs, might have helped to bond them, creating a sense of shared identity and purpose.
So symbolic thought wasn't just about thinking. It was about connecting with others, building relationships, creating a sense of belonging, creating a shared understanding of the world.
Exactly. And it's very likely that many things contributed to symbolic thought. It was probably a mix of cognitive, social, and environmental influences developing over a very long time.
This is all so mind-blowing. We're talking about the very essence of what makes us human. Our ability to think abstractly, to be creative, to connect with each other on a deeper level.
And what's even more amazing is that we're just starting to understand this vast and complex story. New discoveries are always being made, forcing us to constantly reassess how we see the past.
It is humbling, isn't it? We think we're so advanced, yet we're still piecing together our own origins. It's like looking in a mirror and seeing a stranger staring back at us.
Absolutely. And that's what's so exciting about it. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. It's an ongoing journey of discovery, a continuous unfolding of the mysteries of our past.
It's like we're on this incredible adventure pushing back the boundaries of what we know. And the further we go, the more mysterious and awesome our past becomes.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And this journey is far from over. Who knows what incredible discoveries are out there? What other things will we have to rethink? What other stories will we have to rewrite?
Well, on that note, I think it's time to look at some examples of what might be Neanderthal symbolic behavior and see what they can tell us about their cognitive abilities. How about we take a closer look at Bruniquel Cave in France? I've heard some pretty interesting things about that site.
Bruniquel Cave. Yes, that's a fascinating one, shall we?
Welcome back to our deep dive, where we're looking at this whole idea of symbolic thought and where Neanderthals fit in.
And it's important to remember that the evidence for Neanderthal symbolic behavior is still being debated. But some findings are hard to explain away. Like they're just random or purely practical.
Okay, let's get into it. What are we talking about here?
One of the most interesting examples is from Bruniquel Cave in France. Researchers found a bunch of stalagmites carefully arranged, broken and stacked in rings.
Wait, stalagmites? You mean those things that grow from the cave floor? Neanderthals were messing with those?
Yeah. These structures are really old, like 176,000 years old, way before modern humans were in Europe. And it's not like they just piled up rocks randomly. The stalagmites were intentionally broken and arranged. Yeah. Some even show signs of burning.
So they put a lot of work into it. But what was the point? What were they up to in that cave?
That's the big question. We can't know for sure, but it's hard to think of a practical reason for such a complex arrangement.
It does feel like something symbolic, maybe a ritual or even art.
Exactly. And there are other examples too. Neanderthals using pigments, making marks on cave walls, and even collecting weird things like fossils and crystals.
Cave art, stalagmite arrangements, collections. It sounds like we're getting a much more sophisticated picture of Neanderthals than we used to have.
Right. And these findings don't take away from what Homo sapiens achieved, but they challenge that old idea that we're the only ones who can think symbolically and act in complex ways.
It's like our understanding of human evolution is expanding, becoming richer and more nuanced.
Yes, and this has big implications for how we see ourselves and where we fit in the world. It makes us rethink intelligence culture and what it means to be human.
It really makes you think, what other mysteries are out there just waiting to be discovered? What other assumptions will we have to question as we learn more about human evolution?
If we can send probes to Mars and map the human genome, why do we still know so little about ourselves and our past? What else is out there to discover, and what will it tell us about our place in the universe?
Big questions, and I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive for today. We've gone from the origins of symbolic thought to how these different human groups interacted, and we've barely scratched the surface.
Keep exploring this amazing topic. Read the research, visit museums, and keep asking questions.
The more we learn about our past, the better we understand ourselves and the incredible potential we have as a species. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring.